مشاهدينا مرحبا بكم في حوارات السياق. ملامح الخريطة الانتخابية التركية بدأت تتضح بشكل كبير مع حسم الأحزاب الرئيسة لمواقفها من التحالفات في الانتخابات المقبلة، والتي تعتبر مصيرية لرئيس رجب طيب أردوغان وحاسمة بالنسبة للمعارضة التي اتحدت في وجهه. عموما للمزيد من المتابعة ينضم إلينا الدكتور هوارد أينسنستات، الأستاذ المشارك في تاريخ الشرق الأوسط بجامعة سانت لويس. دكتور هوارد، مرحبا بك معنا.
My pleasure.
انتخابات رئاسة تركيا، ما هي فرص أردوغان وفرص المعارضة؟
Well, I think if the elections are reasonably fair, then the opposition should win. Erdogan is suffering from the worst economic disaster that the country has seen in 20 years. It is suffering from diplomatic isolation, and it's suffering from the mismanagement that led to a human tragedy in the earthquake. But the question is, how free and fair will the elections be? And because that's a question mark, the outcome of the election is a question mark as well.
لكن ترشح ثلاثة منافسين لأردوغان، هل سيفتت ذلك أصوات المعارضة وبالتالي يصب في صالح الرئيس وحزبه؟
It's a great question. It's a great question. The parliamentary election is likely to be much easier for the ruling party to win than the presidential election. And that's because they have been able to rig the electoral districts to give them advantage in a majority of the districts. The presidential election is a much more difficult thing to rig because every vote counts equally. But as your question suggested, the addition of two additional opposition candidates muddies the water and makes it harder for the opposition to win first past the post in the way that they had hoped to.
استطلاعات الرأي في أغلبها وضعت كيلجلدار أوغلو في الصدارة بفارق 9 نقاط كاملة عن أردوغان. هل تثق في استطلاعات الرأي التركية وإلى أي مدى هي دقيقة؟
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions. The question is, first of all, are the polls accurate? And the record for Turkish polling this far away from elections is not great. The second problem is the question of undecided votes within the polls, which which pollsters tend to distribute equally, but in fact, most of those undecided voters will return to the party that they had been voting for previously, which in this case would be the AKP-MHP coalition. And the third question is, again, whether the elections will be free and fair, and to the extent to which those polls will mean anything in the long run. So the polling numbers give the opposition reason to hope, but I think that it's an uphill battle for them.
طيب، ما الذي يخيم على هذه الانتخابات؟ على ماذا اجتمعت واختلفت برامج المرشحين؟
Sure. The fundamental question is a referendum on Erdogan's management of the economy and his management of infrastructural growth. And so after 20 years, this is really a referendum on his governance. The opposition promises to return to a more normal foreign policy, a less adventurous foreign policy, should it come to office. It promises more transparency and a return to rule of law. It promises to put the economy right. The government promises much the same. The actual issues, the policy differences between the opposition and the government are not tremendously large. The big difference has to do with who the voters think has a greater capacity to right the economy and normalize Turkish life, which has been undergone such tumult over the last few years.
أود أن أستوضح منك هنا في الإعلام العربي ربما ولسنوات يتم الترويج لأردوغان على أنه في مجال الاقتصاد أنجز الكثير لبلاده. الآن هل بات الاقتصاد نقطة ضعفه؟
Sure. I think that, and I don't think that that's just the Arab world. I think a lot of people have come to think of the AKP as a very effective pro-business party. And that was its record for its first 10 years in office. But starting around 2011 or so, once they had consolidated power, they did the things that big parties in power often do. They started putting political allies into positions that needed expertise. They started to give sweet deals to political businesses that were allies to themselves. They became more corrupt. They became less capable of managing the economy in the ways that they had previously. And so the last 10 years of the AKP's governance have been much less well managed than the first 10 years. We see that in hyperinflation. We see that in climbing unemployment levels. We see that in climbing poverty levels.
طيب ماذا إذا أضفنا لكل هذا تبعات الزلزال وتأثيره على هذه الانتخابات؟
So the earthquake, the AKP came to power in the wake of an earthquake in 1999, and the government's mismanagement of that earthquake in 1999, and they promised to do better. And what we saw in this earthquake is the failure of the AKP to do the kind of preparation to ensure the rule of law about construction, about earthquake proofing. The earthquake itself was unavoidable, but the disaster that occurred was a human-made disaster. It was a corruption-made disaster.
أردوغان قال إن الانتخابات المقبلة يجب أن تكون درساً للولايات المتحدة بعد زيارة السفير الأمريكي لمنافسه. لما حول الرئيس التركي دفة غضبه ضد أمريكا؟
I don't think it means very much, to be honest. I think that it is always good politics in Turkey to talk tough to the West, to talk tough to the United States. I think American diplomats sort of shrug and take it as part of the cost of doing business, but I don't think it actually means very much policy-wise. I think it's simply good politics.
أفهم من حديثك أنه لا تدخلات خارجية في هذه الانتخابات؟
No, I mean the biggest source of foreign influence on the elections has to do with the reticence of foreign investors to invest in a country that is so poorly managed. So once the government starts managing its economy well again, then foreign investors will come back, and that will be good for everyone. Turkey should be a wealthy, successful country. It is much less so right now than it should be. And I think everybody is waiting and hoping for a return to sort of sound economic policies.
باعتقادك ما هي فرص حسم الانتخابات من الجولة الأولى؟
So the fact that there are now 4 candidates rather than 2 candidates makes that less likely than it was previously, and that works to Erdogan's advantage. That he's probably in a better position if he can kick it to a second round than he if it was going to be decided in the first round.
طيب هل تتوقع إقبالاً شعبياً عليها؟
Turkish elections are always taken seriously. The turnout levels are typically much higher than they are in any place in the West. I expect Turkish people to vote in great numbers, probably well over 85% and likely over 95%.
دكتور هوارد، شكرا جزيلا لك للمشاركة معنا في حوارات السياق.
My pleasure.
مشاهدينا، شكرا على طيب المتابعة. إلى الملتقى.